Most people believe their lives are shaped by what they do, their jobs, their habits, their routines. But that's not where it begins. Everything you do, every decision you make, every risk you avoid, every opportunity you chase or ignore, starts with something far less visible, a belief. And the problem is not that we have beliefs. The problem is that most of us never chose them. Think about it. Before you ever failed, before you ever succeeded, before you ever doubted yourself, you absorbed ideas about who you are and what the world is like, ideas about money, about success, about love, about what people like you can or cannot do. And once those beliefs are in place, your brain does something fascinating. It looks for proof, not truth. Proof. If you believe you're not good enough, your mind will collect evidence. Every rejection becomes confirmation. Every mistake becomes a verdict. If you believe success is for other people, you'll notice how easily it comes to them and how hard it feels for you. And slowly, quietly, those beliefs turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Not because they're true, but because you live as if they are. Here's the hard truth I learned. Too late. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we believe it to be. And that belief becomes the lens through which everything passes. Opportunities don't disappear, we simply don't recognize them. Confidence doesn't vanish, we just never give ourselves permission to feel it. Most people spend years trying to change their results without ever questioning the belief system that created those results. They read books, they watch videos, they chase motivation. But motivation fades, information fades, beliefs stay. And until those beliefs change, behavior eventually snaps back to what feels familiar. That's why someone can know exactly what to do and still not do it. That's why advice doesn't work as often as we think it should. Because behavior follows belief, not logic. You can't outwork a belief that says you don't deserve more. You can't hustle your way past a mindset that's trying to keep you safe, small, and predictable. Your brain's primary job is not to make you successful, it's to keep you alive. And familiar feels safe, even when familiar is painful, even when familiar is limiting. So when you try to grow, when you try to step into something new, your brain resists, not because you're weak, not because you lack discipline, but because growth threatens the identity you've been living with for years. That's why change feels uncomfortable. That discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're challenging a belief that has quietly been in control. For 30 years, I thought confidence was something you either had or didn't have. I believed clarity came after success. I believed people who moved boldly were simply built differently. But none of that was true. What I was really saying was this: I don't believe I'm allowed to start before I feel ready. And that belief shaped everything. It shaped the risks I didn't take, the conversations I avoided, the version of myself I postponed becoming. The moment everything began to change was not when I worked harder. It was when I asked a different question. Not what should I do, but why do I believe I can't? That question is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. It forces responsibility. It forces honesty. And honesty is where rewiring begins. Beliefs are not facts. They are stories we've repeated long enough that they feel like facts. And the good news is this: stories can be rewritten, but only when we're brave enough to notice them. You don't rewire your mind by shouting affirmations in the mirror while secretly doubting them. You rewire your mind by catching the thought that says, "This won't work for me," and asking, "Says who?" You rewire your mind by noticing patterns. Not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself. Every time you hesitate, there's a belief underneath. Every time you procrastinate, there's a belief underneath. Every time you settle, there's a belief underneath. And those beliefs were learned, which means they can be unlearned. But here's what most people miss. Replacing a belief doesn't happen all at once. It happens through consistent evidence. Small actions that prove the old story wrong. Not massive leaps. Small intentional steps taken repeatedly. When you act in alignment with a new belief, before it feels comfortable, you send a powerful signal to your brain. You tell it, "This is who we are now." And at first, your brain will resist. It will look for reasons to quit. It will remind you of past failures. That's normal. That's not failure. That's rewiring in progress. Eventually, something shifts. The action that once felt forced begins to feel natural. The courage that once felt borrowed begins to feel owned. And the belief that once felt impossible begins to feel obvious. This is how change actually happens. Not through inspiration alone, but through alignment. alignment between what you say you want and what you're willing to believe about yourself. Most people wait for proof before they believe, but the people who change their lives do the opposite. They believe first, then create the proof. And that's the lesson that took me 30 years to learn. Your life will never rise above the beliefs you refuse to question. But the moment you challenge them, the moment you choose a belief that serves your future instead of protecting your past, you don't just change what you do, you change who you become. And once that happens, everything else follows. We are taught to chase confidence as if it's a prerequisite, as if one day we will wake up and suddenly feel ready. Ready to speak, ready to lead, ready to try, ready to risk. And so we wait. We wait for confidence to arrive like permission. But confidence doesn't work that way. It never has. What we call confidence is often misunderstood. It's not loud. It's not arrogance. It's not the absence of fear. Confidence is simply the feeling that what you're doing makes sense to you. And that feeling doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built on clarity. Clarity is knowing why something matters before you know how it will work. It's understanding what you stand for before you know what you stand on. And yet most people reverse the order. They wait for certainty before they commit. They wait for assurance before they act. They wait for confidence before they move. And in doing so, they remain exactly where they are. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Clarity is not discovered by thinking. It's discovered by choosing. You don't think your way into clarity, you act your way into it. But not random action. Purposeful action, rooted in a reason that goes deeper than comfort or approval. For years, I believed confidence was something successful people were born with. I watched them speak with conviction and thought they must be sure. What I didn't see was the years of uncertainty that came before the certainty, the hesitation before the conviction, the courage to move without guarantees. The human brain hates ambiguity. It craves certainty. And when it doesn't have it, it creates fear. That fear convinces us to wait, to gather more information, to prepare a little longer, to delay just a bit more. But what we're really doing is avoiding the discomfort of not knowing how it will turn out. Clarity doesn't mean you know the outcome. It means you know the direction. It means you know why this path matters more than staying where you are. When your why is strong enough, uncertainty stops being paralyzing and starts being tolerable. Most people are not lacking confidence. They are lacking a reason strong enough to outweigh their fear. When you don't know why you're doing something, every obstacle feels personal. Every setback feels like proof you're not good enough. But when you're clear on why it matters, obstacles become part of the journey, not a verdict on your worth. Think about the moments in your life when you acted despite fear. You spoke up even though your voice shook. You tried even though you weren't ready. You stayed when leaving would have been easier. In those moments, confidence didn't lead you. Clarity gives context to discomfort. It tells you, this is hard, but it's worth it. Without clarity, discomfort feels like danger. With clarity, discomfort feels like growth. This is why advice often fails. People tell you what to do without helping you understand why you should care. And without that why, the advice feels heavy, forced, temporary. You might follow it for a while, but eventually you fall back into old patterns because there was no deeper reason anchoring the behavior. When you are clear on your values, decisions become simpler. Not easier, but simpler. You stop asking, will this make me look good? And start asking, does this align with who I am? And alignment creates confidence, not instantly, but consistently. The irony is that confidence is a byproduct, not a goal. The moment you chase it directly, it slips away. But when you focus on clarity, on purpose, on meaning, on direction, confidence shows up quietly, almost without you noticing. And here's something else I learned the hard way. Clarity doesn't mean perfection. You don't need the perfect plan. You don't need all the answers. You need enough clarity to take the next step. That's it. Just the next step. Waiting for total clarity is just another form of fear dressed up as responsibility. Life doesn't reward certainty. It rewards commitment. And commitment requires a decision before you feel ready. Every time you take action aligned with your why, you build evidence. Evidence that you can trust yourself. Evidence that you can handle discomfort. Evidence that you are capable of more than you thought. That evidence accumulates. And over time, it becomes confidence. This is how confidence is built, not through affirmations, not through pretending, not through waiting, but through action fueled by meaning. If you want to rewire your mind, stop asking, how can I be more confident? Start asking, why does this matter to me? Because when the why is clear, the fear doesn't disappear, but it loses its power. You don't need confidence to begin. You need clarity. Confidence will meet you on the way. And once you understand that, you stop waiting for permission. You stop postponing your life. You stop outsourcing belief to circumstances. You realize that clarity is a choice to move forward even when the path isn't fully lit. That choice changes everything. We talk a lot about discipline as if it's a personality trait, as if some people are born with it and others are simply not. We admire it from a distance. We envy it in others, and we punish ourselves for not having enough of it. But discipline is not about forcing yourself to do things you hate. And it's definitely not about willpower. Willpower is unreliable. It fades when you're tired, stressed, or discouraged. If discipline depended on willpower alone, no one would change for long. What actually sustains discipline is identity. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you believe you are. When your behavior is aligned with your identity, discipline feels natural. When it's not, it feels like constant resistance. This is why some habits stick effortlessly while others feel like daily battles. It's not the habit that's the problem. It's the mismatch between what you're doing and who you believe yourself to be. For years, I tried to discipline my way into a better life. I made promises, I set rules, I created systems, and every time I broke them, I concluded that I lacked discipline. What I didn't realize was that I was trying to act like someone I hadn't decided to become yet. If deep down you still see yourself as someone who quits, someone who procrastinates, someone who plays small, no productivity hack will save you. Because your brain will always pull you back to the identity it recognizes. Not because it wants to sabotage you, but because consistency feels safe. This is why change feels exhausting at first. You're not just changing behavior, you're challenging an identity. And identities don't like to be threatened. When you try to build a new habit, your mind whispers things like, this isn't you, or you failed before, or why bother? That voice is not weakness. It's familiarity fighting to survive. Discipline becomes sustainable only when you stop asking, what do I need to do? And start asking, who do I need to become? Because once that question is answered, the actions become obvious. Think about someone who identifies as a leader. They don't need motivation to prepare, to list, tend to show up. Those behaviors reinforce who they believe they are. The same is true for someone who identifies as healthy, reliable, creative, or resilient. The identity drives the behavior, not the other way around. Most people try to build habits by relying on external pressure, deadlines, rewards, fear of consequences. And while those things can work temporarily, they don't last. The moment the pressure is gone, the behavior disappears. But when the behavior is tied to identity, it continues even when no one is watching. Here's the shift that changed everything for me. Stop negotiating with yourself. When your identity is clear, there is nothing to negotiate. You don't debate whether to act in alignment with who you are. You simply do it. This doesn't mean it's easy. It means it's clear. Discipline feels like sacrifice only when it's disconnected from purpose. When you know why a behavior matters, when it reinforces the person you are becoming, it stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like integrity. You're not giving something up. You're living up to something. Rewiring your mind requires patience. You don't wake up one day with a new identity. You build it through consistent proof. Small actions repeated daily, each one saying, this is who I am now. Miss once, and it's a mistake. Miss twice, and it starts becoming a pattern. Identity is shaped by patterns, not intentions. That's why consistency matters more than intensity. You don't need massive line. You need believable discipline. Actions small enough that your brain doesn't reject them. When the action feels achievable, your brain accepts it as part of your identity. People often ask how to stay disciplined when motivation is gone. The answer is simple. You don't rely on motivation. You rely on identity. Motivation is emotional. Identity is structural. It holds you steady when emotions fluctuate. And when you fail, and you will, you don't spiral into self-judgment. You return to the identity. You ask, what would someone like me do next? That question keeps you moving forward instead of stuck in shame. This is how real transformation happens. Not through punishment, not through pressure, but through alignment. When discipline aligns with identity, self-respect grows. And self-respect is one of the most powerful forces for change. You stop breaking promises to yourself because breaking them would mean betraying who you believe you are. That's the lesson that took me decades to learn. Discipline isn't about controlling yourself. It's about committing to who you are becoming. Once you understand that, discipline stops feeling like a struggle. It becomes a statement. And that statement, repeated daily, rewires everything. Most people don't fail because they aim too high. They fail because they're chasing a finish line that was never theirs to begin with. A definition of success borrowed from parents, society, social media, or a culture that rewards appearing. More than alignment. And the danger isn't that these definitions are wrong. The danger is that they're unexamined. From a very young age, we are taught what winning is supposed to look like. The right job, the right income, the right timeline, the right lifestyle. And without realizing it, we begin organizing our lives around someone else's expectations. We call it ambition. We call it responsibility. But often it's just conformity wearing a sophisticated mask. Here's what I learned the hard way. Burnout doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from doing too much of what doesn't matter to you. You can work long hours and feel energized if the work aligns with your values, and you can work short hours and feel exhausted if it doesn't. Energy is not about time. It's about meaning. When you live someone else's definition of success, everything feels heavier. Achievements feel hollow. Progress feels pressured. And no matter how much you accomplish, there's a quiet dissatisfaction that refuses to leave. Not because you're ungrateful, but because your soul knows the truth before your mind is ready to admit it. Comparison thrives in environments where success is externally defined. The moment you adopt a borrowed scorecard, you start measuring yourself against others. Their pace, their milestones, their outcomes, and comparison is a game you can never win, because there will always be someone ahead of you on a path you didn't choose. The irony is that many people who are successful are quietly miserable. They did everything right, followed the rules, met the expectations, and still feel lost. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded at the wrong thing. Redefining success is uncomfortable because it requires disappointing people. Sometimes the people you love, sometimes the people who supported you, sometimes the version of yourself that wanted approval more than authenticity. But clarity often comes with conflict. And growth often requires letting go of applause. When you define success for yourself, the pressure changes. It doesn't disappear, but it transforms. Instead of pressure to impress, you feel responsibility to live with integrity. Instead of chasing validation, you start chasing alignment, and alignment creates a kind of peace that achievement alone never can. This doesn't mean you stop striving. It means you strive with intention. You choose goals that reflect who you are, not who you're supposed to be. And once that happens, effort feels purposeful, not punishing. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself is simple. If no one was watching, what would success look like? Strip away the audience. Strip away the likes, the praise, the status. What remains is usually closer to the truth than anything you've chased before. Living by your own definition of success doesn't make life easier. It makes it honest. You still face obstacles. You still experience doubt. But the struggle feels meaningful. And meaningful struggle builds resilience, not resentment. Most people don't fear failure. They fear judgment. They fear being misunderstood. They fear being seen as less. But when your definition of success is internal, judgment loses its grip. You stop asking for permission to be yourself. Rewiring your mind means unlearning the idea that success is a universal formula. It isn't. Success is deeply personal. And when you honor that, you stop running someone else's race. The moment you choose your own definition, something remarkable happens. You move slower in some areas and faster in others. You stop forcing progress and start allowing growth. And in that space, fulfillment finally has room to exist. That was one of the hardest lessons to learn. You don't find peace by reaching the top of someone else's mountain. You find peace by choosing the mountain that actually belongs to you. And once you do, the climb, even when it's hard, feels worth it. There is a moment in every life when the truth becomes unavoidable. A moment when you realize that waiting has a cost, that hoping things will change is not the same as choosing to change. And that moment usually arrives quietly, not dramatically. It shows up as frustration, as repetition, as the feeling that you are capable of more but somehow stuck in the same place. Most people want change, but they don't want responsibility. Responsibility feels heavy. It feels unfair. It feels like admitting fault. So we look outward. We blame circumstances, timing, other people, systems. And while some of those things are real, focusing on them gives away the one thing that actually creates momentum: control. Here's the paradox. The moment you take full responsibility is the moment you gain freedom. Because responsibility is not about blame, it's about ownership. And ownership is power. For a long time, I believed responsibility meant criticizing myself for every mistake. I thought it meant carrying guilt. It didn't. What it really meant was stopping the habit of waiting for permission. Permission to start, permission to try, permission to be different. And the day I stopped waiting was the day my future began to change. We often confuse responsibility with harshness, but responsibility is actually compassionate. It says, this is my life and I am allowed to shape it. It removes the illusion that someone else is coming to fix things. And while that realization can feel overwhelming, it is also deeply liberating. When you don't take responsibility, you give your power to circumstances. You become reactive instead of intentional. Your mood depends on what happens to you instead of what you stand for. And over time, that erodes confidence because deep down, you know you're not in the driver's seat. Taking responsibility doesn't mean everything is your fault. It means everything is your opportunity. It means asking better questions. Not why did this happen to me, but what can I do next? That shift alone rewires how your brain approaches problems. Most people wait for clarity before taking responsibility. But responsibility creates clarity. When you decide that your actions matter, your attention sharpens. You stop drifting. You start choosing. Responsibility also means accepting discomfort. Growth is uncomfortable. Ownership is uncomfortable. But discomfort is the price of progress. Avoiding it keeps you comfortable and stuck. Embracing it moves you forward. One of the hardest responsibilities to take is emotional responsibility. Understanding that how you react is always your choice. People can trigger you, but they cannot control you unless you allow them to. The moment you realize that, you stop outsourcing your peace. Another hard responsibility is letting go of excuses that once protected you. Excuses feel safe. They protect your ego. They give you a story that explains why you didn't act. But they also keep you small. When you drop the excuses, you gain honesty. And honesty is where growth begins. Rewiring your mind means learning to say, this may not be my fault, but it is my responsibility. That sentence changes everything. It shifts you from victim to participant, from waiting to creating. Responsibility builds trust with yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do, no matter how small, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on yourself. That trust compounds, and over time it becomes confidence. Most people want motivation. What they really need is self-trust. And self-trust is built through responsibility. There is no perfect moment to take responsibility. There is only now. The moment you decide that your future matters more than your excuses. The moment you choose action over explanation. The moment you stop negotiating with your potential. That's the lesson that took me 30 years to learn. No one is coming to save you. And that is not bad news. It's the best news you will ever hear. Because the same truth that removes your excuses gives you your power back. And once you accept that fully, you don't just change your circumstances. You change your direction. And that changes everything. If there is one truth that ties all of this together, it is this. Your life does not change the moment you learn something new. It changes the moment you see yourself differently. The lessons that took 30 years to learn were never about tactics or shortcuts. They were about perspective, about understanding that the real work has always been internal. Every belief you hold shapes every decision you make. When those beliefs are unexamined, they cue. You quietly limit you. When they are questioned, they become tools instead of cages. Clarity replaces confusion when you stop waiting for confidence and start acting with purpose. Discipline becomes natural when it is rooted in identity, not pressure. And success finally feels fulfilling when it is defined by your values instead of someone else's expectations. Rewiring your mind is not about becoming a new person overnight. It is about returning to the person you were always capable of being, the one who takes responsibility instead of waiting, the one who chooses meaning over comfort, the one who understands that growth feels uncomfortable, not because something is wrong, but because something is changing. What makes these lessons powerful is not how inspiring they sound, but how practical they are when applied consistently. Small choices made daily shape identity. Honest self-reflection reshapes belief. And responsibility, taken fully, restores control. None of this requires perfection. It requires commitment. There will be moments when old patterns try to pull you back. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're becoming aware. Awareness is the first sign of rewiring. Each time you notice a limiting thought and choose differently, you weaken the old story and strengthen the new one. The goal is not a flawless life. The goal is an aligned one. A life where your actions reflect what you believe and what you believe supports who you want to become. When alignment reflects ES approval, peace replaces pressure. And when peace becomes your foundation, progress becomes sustainable. The most important lesson of all is this: you do not need permission to begin. You don't need confidence first. You don't need the perfect plan. You need a decision to take ownership, a decision to define success on your terms, a decision to act in alignment with your values even when it feels uncomfortable. 30 years of lessons can be summarized in one choice, whether you live by default or by design. Rewiring your mind is choosing design, choosing intention, choosing to lead your own life. And when you make that choice consistently and courageously, you don't just change how you think, you change what becomes possible.